Hello, my name's William Shaw and I'm interested in thinking about how the arts can use social media. In the last few years people have been talking a lot about things like Facebook and Twitter and Nings and Flickr, things that connect people to each other, groups of people to each other. Tools that allow people to pass on things that they've made or ideas or stuff that they may have on their computer to other people. How should arts organisations be looking at this world of social media? Firstly, let's take a look and see how extraordinarily quickly these things have grown in recent years. At the last count, there was something like 50 million tweets a day on Twitter. Even more phenomenally, in April 2009, there were 200 million people using Facebook on a regular basis. Last February, this figure had grown to 400 million users. It's doubled in less than a year. One of the things that's driving this growth, of course, is the arrival of new devices like smartphones, which kind of means that for some people, social media can fill their every waking minute. As it continues to grow, it has this disruptive effect on everything that surrounds it. Local newspapers are closing, TV and radio is losing advertising revenue to the internet, and as a result, the people who normally write about the arts are disappearing too. This movie critic writes a blog about how his colleagues are disappearing one by one. So, what does this mean for the way we relate to our audience now? In the past, we used to have art, and you'd run a media campaign, and out of that you got an audience. But with old media weakening, that model doesn't work so well anymore. There's a very different dynamic starting to emerge. If you look at the history of mass communication, you could say it started with books, which were pretty much the ultimate disruptive medium. Books brought about the Reformation and disrupted church and state, but they were basically a fixed one-way communication between the author and the reader. Next came the telegraph and then the telephone. Two-way communication in real time, but only between individuals still. The 20th century was the era of broadcasting. Now you could talk to crowds, but it was still one way. The crowds couldn't answer back. With the internet, of course, everyone can answer back, and in real time. Some people are finding this a little difficult to get to grips with. But if you think about it, this is pretty much what the artists had to contend with before the era of broadcasting. And of course, what the social web also does is it allows people to get together and create art on their own terms. To some people, this is so exciting that they end up saying things like this, which suggests that the old model hasn't just been replaced, it's been totally reversed. But of course, although these initiatives are really brilliant, everybody isn't a curator. If they were, I would be a nuclear physicist. In fact, what the internet is doing is bringing the audience closer to the artist, and also to the institutions that deliver that art, which is presumably no bad thing, as we're heading into an era in which arts funding is going to be cut, and we're going to need our audience's support. So how do we make sure that our online social networks are working for us, that they're strong? Well, online networks are pretty much the same as offline ones. Sociologists say they rely on a kind of reciprocity, on a give and take, on an exchange of gifts. So if you just tell your audience that you've got some tickets on sale for some show, they're probably not going to want to pass that information on to anybody else because it's of no particular value to them. So the trick is to start thinking about the things that you can afford to give away. Not the art itself, obviously, but What have you got lying around on the shelves in your building? Could even be a ticket offered, but just for your social networks, exclusively for them. What sort of people have you got in your building or coming in and out of your building that the outside world actually really wants to know about? The thing about arts organisations is they're full of people who the rest of us think are extremely interesting. People really want to hear the stories about what you do, and it's amazing how much you can do with a £120 HD flip cam and some freebie editing software. And of course, it can't just be about marketing, because it's not really something that a single department or a single person should be doing. It's something the whole organisation should be doing, from the artists downwards. And also, most arts organisations don't really have the capacity to do something like set up a social media department. They're all working to their capacity anyway, without being given this kind of extra work. So it's only when it's taken on by the whole organisation that it becomes something that's actually practical to achieve. It's a question of making it reflect and be part of the art that you make. And here's an idea. If networks are all about generosity and trust, what about talking about what some of your fellow organisations are doing, stuff that you like? Because after all, that's what the internet does, talk about other people. If there are less critics out there, maybe it's important to start doing that. One final point. Nobody predicted how much the experience of going online was going to change our attitude to what was offline. Take the music industry. It's been in a decline as people download more and more music and pirate it. But when it comes to live music, something odd's gone on. Instead of paying for records, they're now paying to see people play live, and actually paying more than they ever paid for those records in the first place. And what about literary festivals? The last decade has seen the least performative art form of all turned into a spectacle, people turning up just to see their favourite author read a book. There's barely a town in the British Isles without a literary festival. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is the coming of the social web may be a disruption, but for the arts it's also a major opportunity.